Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Few people are in doubt 2016 has been one of the roughest years in recent memories, with everything from terrorist attacks and unrest in Europe to high-profile violence and instability in the US. And the one overriding event, however, has been the outcome of the US election, with Donald Trump clinching victory contrary to the predictions of pundits and analysts alike. This victory came after an exceedingly vicious campaign on both sides, with serious accusations of tax dodging, sexual assault and misogyny, racism, xenophobia levied against Trump, and accusations of mishandling classified information and running a pay-for-play racket as Secretary of State, and of course a whole lot of corruption levied against Clinton and elements of her campaign staff. Now, of course, some of these accusations actually had merit, and some of these accusations were baseless smears, which is usual in politics, and of course each claim has to be evaluated separately. One claim being false doesn't make any of the others false. In this particular case, what we're going to be looking at is a case of some very serious allegations of rape, kidnapping and assault against Donald Trump, brought under some very mysterious circumstances earlier this year, and the aim of this video is going to be to put all of the allegations in the specific case to bed, because this case keeps getting brought up by mainstream and sometimes the alternative media as if there was some kind of great point here. And besides, the truth, what we know of it, is mighty interesting. But before we can go deeper, we're going to need some background into the man at the center of this case, the reclusive billionaire Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Epstein is a financier who was very well known as a member of the New York social scene in the 1990s up until the early 2000s. A published address book of his boasted the names of many celebrities and business people, including Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, Prince Andrew, and Naomi Campbell, among others, who he would often take trips with aboard his private jet to his 78-acre private island in the US Virgin Islands. And this is where the seediness enters. In 2008, Epstein pled guilty to one count of soliciting an underage prostitute, and as part of his plea deal, all of Epstein's alleged co-conspirators avoided prosecution. What was basically alleged was that Epstein would pay young teenage girls as young as 12 for quote-unquote massage sessions, in which he would then commit several unlawful sexual acts upon them, earning his private plane the name the Lolita Express. After this conviction, federal and state officials then began casting a far wider net, allegedly finding as many as 35 women who claimed to have been minors at the time that Epstein abused them, and according to Gawker, Epstein has settled lawsuits with around 30 of these women out of court. The one lawsuit that really stands out is that of Virginia Roberts Guthrie, which alleges that Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's girlfriend in the 90s up until the early 2000s, acted like a madam who pimped out young girls to a range of rich clients. So basically what we have in Epstein is an alleged predatory pedophile with convictions for having sex with an underage girl and someone who had a very big network of contacts. Now, how does all of that relate to Donald Trump? Well, until the lawsuit, which I'm going to be exploring in a second, it didn't really. There is a lot of guilt by association here. Basically, Trump had been accused of flying in the plane at least once. However, it should be noted that, according to the flight logs, Bill Clinton flew on the same plane 26 times, and many other celebrities flew on it a lot more than is provable to Donald Trump. And secondly, according to the evidence turned up in 2009, he called Epstein twice in November 2004. The third thing that gets brought up that tied Trump to Epstein is this quote: "I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy, he's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life." And then of course the last thing is Trump's name and 14 numbers for his family being in Epstein's old address book, which of course contained the names and numbers of plenty of other people. So that was round about the extent of Trump's involvement up until the 26th of April 2016. There was no evidence linking Trump to the sexual abuse, and nothing that would single Trump out from the crowd of celebrities celebrities hovering around Epstein as being complicit in a conspiracy to molest underage girls. So, why the 26th of April 2016? Because that's the date where a mysterious lawsuit was filed in the United States Court Central District of California under the name of Katie Johnson. And this case has been what has come up again and again and again in the media. So there are several odd things about this case right off the bat. The first of which was that it was filed under a pseudonym, which is technically legal and a common practice in suits for sexual assault, but basically no one had a clue who really filed it. The second odd thing was the address on the lawsuit, which Radar Online actually traced back to a foreclosed house in LA that had been empty since its owner had died in 2015. So once again, no one knew who filed the suit. And of course, the final thing is that Johnson was appearing in pro per, which means that she was representing herself. There was no lawyer attached to the case. Now, as for the allegations in the suit itself, they're actually quite incendiary. Allegedly, over a 4-month time span in 1994, from June through September, 13-year-old Katie Johnson was subjected to a series of rapes and assaults by Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. 3 counts for Epstein and 4 counts for Trump. Katie was allegedly lured by the promise of a modeling job, which is odd because Epstein has nothing to do with advertising or fashion or anything like that, but she was lured by that promise of a modeling job to a series of underground, secret sex parties at Epstein's New York residence, which is where she met Trump and the rape occurred. Now, on the first occasion, she allegedly was forced to manually stimulate Trump. On the second occasion, things escalated to oral sex. The third time involved Katie being forced to commit a unspecified sex act on a 12-year-old Mexican girl named quote-unquote Maria for the purposes of protecting identity, followed by oral sex on Trump. And on the final time, Trump allegedly raped Katie and took her virginity while she pleaded with him not to. As far as Epstein goes, there are 3 counts. The first count involved Katie being forced to disrobe and give Epstein a massage, followed by manual stimulation. On the second occasion, there was again a massage and manual stimulation, with Trump allegedly present with another 13-year-old girl, after which there was an argument as to who was going to take Katie's virginity. Trump seems to have won this argument as previously stated, and when Epstein learnt of this later, he became enraged and allegedly raped and sodomized Katie before beating her for letting Trump take her virginity. The lawsuit was seeking reparations for this trauma in the amount of $100 million. Now, in response to these allegations, Trump completely denied them, stating that the allegations were not only categorically false but disgusting at the highest level and clearly framed to solicit media attention, or perhaps are simply politically motivated. There is absolutely no merit to these allegations, period. Now, this original lawsuit filed in California was basically unnoticed outside of a few outlets picking it up on the fringes, and was dismissed on May the 5th, 2016 due to the curious fact that despite being a civil case based on a violation of Johnson's human rights on a federal level, no actual human rights breaches were identified in the suit itself. And when the court sent out papers basically saying that the suit was dismissed, those papers went back to that empty house and they came back with a note saying that there were no new addresses found. So once again, no one had a clue who actually filed this thing. So that was where the story could have ended. A mysterious lawsuit surfaces without a lot of credibility and no lawyer attached. It's largely ignored by the press and denied by Trump, and then it's eventually dismissed and fades into nothingness. Of course, it didn't end there. On June the 20th, 2016, the suit was refiled in New York, and this is where things got interesting, to say the very least. This time around, the suit started getting more and more attention, though perhaps not the attention that the people behind the suit wanted. Out of all the organizations who published articles on the second filing, there are 3 articles by 3 organizations that really stood out. A piece by The Guardian, a piece by Jezebel, and a piece by the online magazine Revelist, all of who did extensive investigative reporting of quite a high caliber into the mysterious people behind this lawsuit. And it's worth noting that all of these organizations aren't even remotely what you'd call a pro-Trump or right-leaning right-wing organization. So let's start with a piece from Jezebel called "Here's How the Wild Lawsuit Accusing Donald Trump of Raping a 13-year-old Girl Hit the Headlines." This article chronicled the people behind the lawsuit and their interactions with Gawker Media over the last 2-ish years. So on August the 5th, 2015, over 6 months before the lawsuit was initially filed, there was an anonymous voicemail left for a member of Gawker's staff from a man going by the name of quote-unquote L. Taylor, a mysterious figure who had been the gatekeeper for the Katie Johnson story right from the beginning. All press inquiries had to go directly to Taylor, and then he would quote-unquote contact Johnson. Anyway, Taylor claimed that he had some incendiary info on Donald Trump, and according to Jezebel, over the next few months, Gawker staff as well as the Taylor character and a videographer named Jonathan Lorner, more on him later, had numerous phone and email conversations. In March 2016, Gawker entered into a non-disclosure agreement with Taylor, which is typical when a media company is looking to buy information from a source, which of course was Gawker's forte. Though according to Jezebel, no money ever exchanged hands and nothing was bought from L. Taylor. A short while later, in April, the first lawsuit was filed in California. So as previously mentioned, the lawsuit went almost unnoticed and died on its own accord, and it's around that time that this mysterious Taylor character just stopped talking to Gawker altogether. However, a few months later in June, Gawker were contacted yet again, this time by a mysterious group called Vote Trump Get Dumped, website now deleted, who told Gawker about criminal charges, this time filed in New York by the same Katie Johnson, and that there was something about to happen. These charges turned out to not have been filed at all, but this served as a jumping off point for Gawker to get in touch with a guy by the name of Steve Bayer. Bayer was essentially acting as a financial backer behind this Vote Trump Get Dumped group. Bayer is also well known in conservative circles for his email campaigns and various publicity stunts over the years, as well as his strong dislike for Donald Trump. Bayer claimed to have been contacted by this L. Taylor character himself, but outside of phone calls he had never physically met this Katie Johnson. He also claimed that there was a video of this Katie Johnson in a disguise out there. A few days later, on June the 16th, 2016, Gawker was linked to this video, which incidentally was shot by Jonathan Lorner, a previously mentioned videographer, and the video in question was also later uploaded to Vimeo by Taylor or someone with access to the uncensored video, because Katie's face wasn't blurred out in the video thumbnail. As for the video itself, it's pretty much just a retread of the allegations I went over previously, this time being told by someone with their face and voice being disguised, claiming to be the plaintiff Katie Johnson from the California case. On the 8th of June 2016, the Jezebel reporter got in touch with this Taylor character himself via Steve Bayer. Taylor claimed that he had met Katie at a party, and she told him her story unsolicited sometime in 2014. He also said that the plan was to try and file charges in New York and then try to pursue a lawsuit as well. After that point, the reporter had no further contact with Taylor, but kept in touch with Bayer until on June the 16th, a few days later, Bayer said that the story was about to break. And sure enough, on the 20th, the lawsuit was filed in New York. This new suit was filed by a reputable patent attorney from New Jersey who claims to have read about the case on a gossip website sometime after his first filing. Now, this patent attorney has sworn up and down that Katie Johnson actually exists, but he had never actually physically met her. He had only had phone calls with her, much like Steve Bayer had. And of course, speaking about Steve Bayer, according to the Daily Beast, it was him who funded this lawsuit, though the financial relationship between himself and Taylor and the people who brought the lawsuit completely deteriorated within the first month. So that about does it for the Jezebel article and the associated issues, but that leaves us with a whole load of questions. Who is this L. Taylor character? Who's this woman in the blonde wig? What the hell is actually going on here? Well, a Guardian piece entitled "Rape Lawsuits Against Donald Trump Linked to Former TV TV producer, published on the 7th of July 2016, actually dug into the people behind the lawsuit and came up with some surprising answers. So according to The Guardian, this L. Taylor character, who was acting as the gatekeeper for this story, was actually shopping around this video for months before the second filing and was looking to sell this tape to interested outlets, probably Gawker, for $1 million. Now, L. Taylor put himself forward to the press with this photo, but the problem is that this isn't L. Taylor. This is in fact a small-time TV producer called L. Bowman. So when The Guardian followed up with Bowman, he said that the man actually calling himself L. Taylor is in fact an ex-TV producer known as Norm Lubo, or as he commonly appeared on TV, Reverend Bud Green. The Guardian of course did a lot of other fact checking that basically proves that L. Taylor is in fact Lubo, and has been since the beginning, including matching Taylor's numbers and email addresses to Lubo, comparing Taylor's statements about his family to Lubo's family situation, and matching the area code for the number on the lawsuit to Palm Desert, California, Lubo's last known address. Now, this Norm Lubo / L. Taylor / Reverend Bud Green guy has an interesting history. In 1995, according to the New York Post, he claimed to have sold drugs to O.J. Simpson under yet another alias. Lubo, of course, denied this report. In 1998, he appeared in disguise in the controversial documentary Kurt and Courtney alongside L. Bowman, the man whose photo he sent to the press. In 2011, during the Casey Anthony trial, someone calling themselves L. Taylor came out of the woodwork claiming to have spoken to Casey, which proved to be a hoax in and of itself. In 2014, Lubo took responsibility for the American flag over the Brooklyn Bridge being changed to white flag, which was a hoax, as the German artist responsible for changing the flags eventually claimed responsibility along with the pictures to prove it. In addition to this, if you go to reverendbudgreen.com, you see a lot of very anti-Trump articles, including one from March 2016, which states, Rev Bud Green continues assault on Donald, aka Little Hitler Trump, which went up just before the lawsuit hit. Finally, after several times asking Taylor, aka Lubo, for comment on the information that The Guardian had just discovered and never getting an answer, they finally got a text message from one of the numbers belonging to quote-unquote Taylor, this time writing as Katie, saying that she nor Taylor had ever heard of anyone named Norm Lubo. And so there we have it. The man who was behind the lawsuit, to the extent that a number basically tied to him was on the original lawsuit itself, is a well-known celebrity hoaxer, and that fact by itself throws even more doubt on the allegations. So now we can move to the final piece, the one and only interview with the alleged victim ever given to the press over at Revelist.com, in a piece called I Talked to the Woman Accusing Donald Trump of Rape and Am More Confused Than Ever, published on the 13th of July 2016. So the Revelist piece starts by talking about Katie filing the second lawsuit, and it goes through the reasoning for her filing it anonymously because of alleged threats of death by Epstein and Trump. So Revelist started the investigation by talking to Thomas Meagher, a previously mentioned patent attorney from New Jersey who was hired for the New York trial despite never dealing with this kind of lawsuit before. Through this connection to Meagher, the Revelist reporter tried to secure an interview with Johnson herself. After weeks of back and forth, they finally got an interview on July the 11th, 2016 at 11:45 p.m. The story which Katie outlined in the interview was basically the same as the previous court cases. However, when it came to certain details and answering the reporter's questions in more depth, that's when things became decidedly fuzzy. For example, she couldn't remember how many people there were at the party she attended or who exactly was there, just that there were a lot of people and that the house that this occurred in was very well furnished. On other points though, she was more accurate. For example, the way that she described Epstein dressing or the way that the house was laid out seemed to match the testimony of Vanity Fair journalist Vicky Ward, who did a profile on him. Though this doesn't really prove much because Ward's testimony has been publicly available for some time now. However, one person who disputes Katie's account, according to the Revelist piece, is Mike Fiston, who was a former Miami-Dade detective who was brought in as a private private investigator on some of the claims against Epstein, and so he's intimately familiar with the kind of things that went on around Epstein and with all of the accusations and details of those cases. And I quote, "Jeffrey never had parties like described in their complaint," Fiston told me. "Jeffrey had sex parties for sure with 2 or 3 girls, but never with other guys. There were men in attendance at Epstein's more lavish affairs," Fiston said, "but nothing illicit ever happened at such events. He loved having these young girls around him," Fiston acknowledged, "but at these parties with everybody around, nothing ever happened." And further, "I interviewed hundreds of victims, people who were victimized by Jeffrey, worked with him, were part of his organization," Fiston told me. "I interviewed them, the FBI interviewed them. Trump never came up involved in any part of his life, anywhere, at any time, by anybody." Asked why Trump was named in this lawsuit, Fiston said flatly they threw Trump's name in there. And so what you have there is a complete denial of this account by not only someone who's a neutral party, but someone who knows the Epstein case very, very well and who has quite a successful career as a private investigator. Where things got more interesting during the Katie interview is when Al Taylor, aka Norm Lubo, came up. In this case, Katie told a completely different version of the story of how she met this Taylor guy. She claimed that they met through a mutual friend who thought that Taylor could help her out with the case, and he was instrumental in putting the first lawsuit together. In fact, she says that it couldn't have happened without him. And that pretty much covers it for the last piece here, the Revelist piece. So once the lawsuit was filed in New York, it was dropped for a second time by being voluntarily dismissed on the 19th of September 2016 before being refiled on the 30th of September 2016 with the exact same allegations once again. And on the 4th of October, a judge ordered a status conference for the 16th of December, meaning that both the accused and the plaintiff were due in court to discuss the case on the 16th of December. Katie then scheduled a press conference for the 2nd of November, which she failed to appear at, and then finally the case was dropped mysteriously for the last time on the 5th of November 2016, just 3 days before the election, with the case never seeing a second inside of a courtroom. Now to wrap up, there is one final loose end, and that is an odd organization called Justice for Katie. This organization can be found at www.justiceforkatie.com before it mysteriously disappeared, and the Justice for Katie watermark is actually found on the video that was released. The site itself contains a collection of very odd documents, such as letters to public officials from Katie, etc., that weren't made very public. It also contained a request for donations to a particular JP Morgan Chase account, only when you run the routing number you don't get a New York account, you get Chicago and Michigan, so there's no telling where the hell the money is actually going to, if there was ever any money donated in the first place. All in all, in this organization we have yet another odd aspect to a really, really bizarre set of events. So at the end of the day, what the hell do we have here? Well, it's a little bit difficult to say. The first thing to bear in mind is that outside of Trump's ex-wife, Katie Johnson in inverted commas is the only rape claim being made against Trump that has come to light recently. You also have here a case that has never seen the inside of a courtroom, that is entirely based on 2 people's eyewitness testimony who there is no real proof even exist, the only press conference being cancelled at the last second. You also have an expert who's intimately familiar with the case against Jeffrey Epstein, who is under no illusion that the events as described never happened and weren't anything close to what could actually be proven happened. And then you have the chief person in charge of pushing these allegations to the press being a well-known celebrity hoaxer. And through all of this, you have a common thread of money. For example, the demand for $100 million in damages, the attempted sale of the video for $1 million to various press outlets, and of course the fishy legal donations and the financial backing of Steve Bayer. So clearly, if this is all a hoax, someone was hoping to make a decent amount of money out of it. All in all, I don't think it would be possible to construct a less credible case that Donald Trump is a secret pedophile rapist who was involved in whatever Jeffrey Epstein has going on. Of course, this in and of itself doesn't prove or disprove any of the other allegations against Trump. Those are entirely matters unto themselves. It's just worth bringing all of this up whenever a media talking head sees sees fit to reference this case as if it proves some grand point.
Specifically who voted for a man who is going to be on trial for sexually assaulting a child. A pedophile.
Yeah.
I've been Dangerous Analysis. Thank you to my patrons and subscribers. And as always,
good night and good luck.